Assalamu alaikum. 4 after 8 o'clock Central African time. Arshad Yusufzai standing by in Pakistan. He's a journalist and he's going to be talking to us about the killing of the Al Qaeda leader by a US drone strike. And the leader and his family were in Afghanistan, in Kabul, in Afghanistan. Let's hear about how the events unfolded. What are the Afghanistani people saying? What's the rest of the world? How are they responding to this killing by a US drone strike? Arshad Yusufzai, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the program.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you for having me on the show.
Lovely to have you here. And just correct me on the pronunciation of Ayman's surname, please.
Yeah, it's Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri. So you are pronouncing it
Zawahiri.
correctly.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, wonderful. Right. Is this a shocker as far as possibly Middle East countries are concerned and the rest of the world?
I think it is a big shock, and not just for Middle Eastern countries, but for the entire world, I would say. Especially this coming at a time where Afghanistan is under the Taliban control for almost a year. Nothing like this happened after the drone strike in Kabul last year when the US forces were withdrawing and a house was targeted, which eventually turned out to be civilians killed in the incident. The Taliban and the Afghan people knew that the drones were in the air almost round the clock, or they were always surveilling around Kabul. But no one expected the Americans to strike, and no one knew where and when and why or who would be targeted, because it was believed generally that everything has come to a calm now. No one is a target, a visible target, and it was sort of felt that Al Qaeda and who else is hiding or were hiding in Afghanistan have gone completely out of the radar's attraction. But this happens at a time where everybody is caught by surprise, I believe. So it is a shocking news for the entire world.
All right. So Ayman al-Zawahiri was number two as far as after the killing of Osama bin Laden. And he was, as far as the West is concerned, particularly the United States, he was the key number one person as the Al Qaeda leader. Let's look at the links between Al Qaeda and Taliban. Do you think there's going to be a response by Taliban or Al Qaeda? Because obviously Joe Biden has very confidently gone on to say that, and I quote, justice has been delivered and this terrorist leader is no more. This was obviously in a special televised address from outside the White House to the rest of the United States and the Western world. Let's look at that situation.
Yeah, I remember hearing the name al-Zawahiri when I was a school-going kid back in 1997, 98. He was the number two, the right-hand man to Osama bin Laden. And I remember my father interviewing bin Laden. The photo that is on display on your screen is probably from the same interview that my father conducted with bin Laden after
Mhm.
the US strike in Host under President Bill Clinton. Zawahiri name regularly appeared on media since then, and after 2011, when Osama bin Laden was killed in a similar fashion in Pakistan's Abbottabad, um, I think saying that the most wanted enemy has been eliminated is correct in the sense that just like bin Laden was in the end, Zawahiri had been for many years in the past the ceremonial leader of a terrorist group that was sort of fighting for its existence in Afghanistan. They were not much active practically. I think they weren't involved in anything in the past many years in Afghanistan. So, yes, he was the spiritual leader, the ceremonial leader of Al Qaeda in Afghanistan and around the world. But I think he was sort of living a quiet, retired life, just like Bin Laden, and occasionally issuing statements to his followers or his group or to the world. That is what I believe was happening. I think it is not going to be, if we talk about Al Qaeda's strength or its capacity, it's going to remain the same uh, because there was nothing much happening on their side, at least in our part of the world, that is Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Okay, so let's look at the issue around Joe Biden. Biden suggesting that a terrorist, one of the most feared terrorists as far as the Western world is concerned, has been killed. And my earlier question, the links between Al Qaeda and Taliban, is it just different? Is it the same organizations, just working under different names in different parts of the Middle East?
I on the question about Afghan Taliban's contact or relation with the Al Qaeda, I believe this relation goes on for many years. And ever since the Afghan Taliban refused to hand over bin Laden to the United States in 2001, and as a consequence, they lost their government, their rule in Afghanistan, and we saw a 20 years long war in Afghanistan. I think that commitment to protect any I would say any guests, as the Afghan Taliban would call them, uh, 21 years ago, remains the same. That whoever is hiding in Afghanistan, whoever is staying here, will not be or cannot be forced out of the country. And there are certain reasons for that. One is obviously the Afghan Taliban are not in a position to make enemies. They are already fighting a difficult war against Daesh or ISK, Islamic State Khorasan chapter. So for Afghan Taliban to have a relation of enmity with Al Qaeda or with Pakistani TTP or other groups like ETIM or the IMU, who are still hiding in Afghanistan, it is difficult. But there are, if you look at the history, the Afghan Taliban fought the Americans and the Allied forces in Afghanistan. And there were many reports that Al Qaeda was involved in those fightings. They supported the Afghan Taliban somehow in their cause. So that relation remains. And I think it will continue despite such incidents taking place.
Okay, I want to also go to a joint declaration between the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan and the United States of America for supposedly bringing peace to Afghanistan. It's a three-pager, and I want to go to part three, uh, paragraph three. I'm not sure if you have it in front of you, but I'm going to read it out to you and see what your response is like. And I know that this um, killing or assassination happened on Sunday, so undoubtedly there's a lot of information out in the Middle East, very especially in Afghanistan. Possible retaliations. Are there going to be diplomatic talks following the killing of the Al Qaeda leader? And let me go to part three, paragraph three of this particular declaration. I'm not sure if you're aware of it. Joint declaration between the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan and the US for bringing peace to Afghanistan. It reads, the United States will refrain from the threat or the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of Afghanistan or intervening in its domestic affairs. And it's done the exact opposite in this instance by the assassination of the Al Qaeda leader being killed on Sunday. How do you respond to that?
I think it's, just like you mentioned, it is exactly the opposite of what was agreed upon by the United States and the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Uh, the Americans have violated, as the Afghan Taliban have mentioned it rightly, that the Doha Agreement clauses have been violated in this attack. But so has been the promise by the Afghan Taliban that their soil would not be used to provide sanctuaries to terrorist organizations or terrorists. I believe that it. On the other hand, this creates serious problems for the Taliban that This killing proves that if they were not harboring or if they were not aware, even then, a terrorist organization's leader was found or and killed inside the capital city of Afghanistan, which is controlled by the Taliban. So I think it's violation by both sides. And you mentioned diplomatic ties. I believe that
Okay,
it's
can
going
I
to
ask
suffer
you,
a heavy blow.
Arshad, Arshad, can I ask you just to hold that
Yeah,
thought, please? I'll come back to you right after the ad break. Do
sure,
stand
sure.
by.
Okay.
Kitchen, the house of the home, where memories are made and celebrated. A fancy place for those freshly stuffed pancakes early in the morning, or for the late night snack munchies. We are in there together, cooking, eating, and celebrating life together. Let's keep the kitchen a place that is shared by everyone, where we build stronger bonds and grow together. Simple, now we're cooking. Visit nowwe'recooking.co.za for recipes that everyone can help make. Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Humanity sets the agenda.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, 17 after 8 o'clock. Welcome back. This is News and Views with me, Julie Ali, right here on Salam Media. We are talking with Arshad Yusufzai. He's a journalist based in Pakistan. We're talking about the assassination of the al-Qaeda leader, Ayman al-Zawahiri, and if there are going to be any repercussions, because had this been the other way around, in terms of Al Qaeda having possibly violated the joint declaration between the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan and the United States of America for bringing peace to Pakistan. I'm kind of wondering what would the repercussions have been, not only on Al Qaeda but Taliban themselves and the people of Afghanistan who are just beginning to try and get to some form of normality. Arshad, your thoughts on my opening statement?
I'm really sorry, I could not hear you properly. The voice is breaking. I'm really
Oh,
sorry
is
for
it
that.
breaking up? Okay, let me just repeat the question. We stopped before the ad break on the issue of, does this now mean that diplomatic talks are going to go ahead? Because had the situation been reversed, had it been obviously Afghanistan that had violated the supposed declaration between Afghanistan and the US regarding peace in Afghanistan, I have no doubt in my mind that there would have been fierce repercussions by the US on Afghanistan. Now that it's the other way around, what do you suppose is going to happen? Will there be no repercussions? Because this is a superpower that has violated, that has breached this peace agreement?
Well, I've got the question now, and I believe that, if we look at this incident from the Afghan perspective, it's definitely a violation of the Doha Agreement, and the superpower has violated its promise. But if you look at it from the other angle, that is the Western perspective, there would definitely be questioning the presence of the Al Qaeda head in Kabul, which also violates the point that terrorists would not be harbored or sanctuaries would not be provided to them in Afghanistan. However, when we talk about the Afghan Taliban, excuse me, the Afghan Taliban responding to this, they would not be bothered if they are dealing with the superpowers. They would not be bothered who the opponent is. This problem is going to definitely, explode in a way that diplomatic ties would definitely suffer. The ties have already suffered a lot in the past 11 months, but I believe that this will take it to the deepest points at the moment, and this is also going to create, or further mistrust would be coming up after this attack. The Afghan Taliban, though on the front of it, on the front face, they were trying to get to have an open access to the world, and they were allowing the Western powers to meet the Taliban in Doha and also in Kabul and elsewhere in the world. But now those Taliban who were questioning these things, these opening up of the Afghan Taliban, or who are against this leniency towards the West, would have a valid point, and they would get stronger, and their agenda of going tougher on the laws and rules and the demands of the Western world would gain more momentum, I see. It also creates a problem for the Afghan Taliban, because after this attack, questions would be asked within the movement, that who was, if there was anyone hiding or harboring the Al Qaeda leader, there would be questions asked who was doing it, who was behind it. There are certain groups or people of different thinking in the Afghan Taliban. And then there's this bigger question of who provided the ground intelligence to Americans,
Absolutely.
because they could not target someone hiding in a house in Afghanistan's capital, in the middle of the capital, in Wazir Akbar Khan. So that is also a question, and it could easily create problems for the Afghan Taliban within the movement, because they would be suspecting their own comrades.
So this obviously sows further dissension within the organization, Taliban itself and Al Qaeda. We understand that al-Zahrawi was actually leading a very quiet life. He's quite old now, I should imagine, in his 80s. Was he still active in Al Qaeda? And added to that, let me just add, for the interest and information, for information purposes, Al Zahrawi was an Egyptian surgeon, and the Americans have had put a $25 million reward on his head, because they have claimed that Zahrawi helped coordinate the September 11, 2001 attacks on the US, which, according to the Americans, killed nearly 3,000 people. What more do you know about that, and how do we address this question then?
Yes, as we mentioned earlier, Dr. Zawahiri was the number two when Al Qaeda came to Afghanistan in 1996. Just like you mentioned, he was a surgeon by profession. That's why he was referred to, or he was always within the movement, and within Al Qaeda, and to others, to journalists as well. He was known as Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri. He remained the number two till the death of bin Laden in 2011, and after that, he was announced the supreme leader, or the head of the movement. But in the past 11 years, even though he issued a lot of threatening statements, but I believe the Americans had they knew, and so did we, that Al Qaeda's back was broken with the killing of bin Laden in 2011. However, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri remained the spiritual leader of the movement, And just like you mentioned, the American point of view that he was one of the masterminds behind the 2001 attacks on the Twin Towers. Um, he was wanted to Americans. However, I look at it at his last few years follow the same pattern, just like Bin Laden, living in unknown locations, living quiet life and issuing occasional statements and living with his family. So, it sort of gives us this understanding that he was too old to operate actively, and he was just issuing statements to people who were not in a position to follow them accordingly. But they had a media presence, and so was he, just like Bin Laden in his end years.
My final question to you, Arshad Yusufzai, journalist based in Pakistan. What does this now do in terms of leadership as far as Al Qaeda is concerned? Um, Obviously, somebody needs to come up and head the organization, or as according to American thinking, does this mean that they've completely weakened Al Qaeda and it's going to eventually disintegrate? And then response and thoughts from Taliban in Afghanistan. I'm sure there must be lots of media reportage on the issue and feelings and responses by the Taliban themselves regarding this killing.
Yeah. On your first part of the question, it could go either way. Uh, if we follow the American string that it has effectively ended Al Qaeda, that make a sense to some extent that knowing that Al Qaeda was not active, Al Qaeda in Afghanistan at least was not active practically for the past few years, at least 7 8 years. So that is a possibility, but to me there is also a possibility, and we have seen examples with other militant or terrorist groups in the past, that after the death of one leader, it is replaced by someone who is more furious, more dangerous to the peace in the region and also to international community, international to the world. So there is also that possibility that Zawahiri could be replaced by someone who could completely overhaul the Al Qaeda movement in Afghanistan, and who could also make it a bigger or more serious of an organization again. So that problem remains there. But talking about how the Afghan Taliban are going to respond, they don't have any military power, and they don't have any authority to bring sanctions onto America or someone else. That they cannot do. However, there's a possibility that the Taliban would stop, at least for the moment, for the next few months or a year or so. They would stop responding to meeting calls from the Americans. At least uh, those meetings they regularly held in Doha or in Afghanistan or elsewhere. And they probably would show their anger in any such meeting in the future, because you know that's the only thing they can do at the moment. They cannot do anything else other than that. And this also brings this issue of the mistrust that would be created among the Taliban for any humanitarian organization or NGO working in Afghanistan, including the ICRC or United Nations and others, because there will be a growing concern among the Taliban that ground intelligence could have been provided by any of these people, since they suspect everybody now.
Mm,
They
mm,
would be suspecting people who held meetings in or around those areas in Kabul, or anyone who had access to the Taliban who were working, sort of close to anyone who were harboring or protecting this Al Qaeda leader. So there is a greater risk of the Taliban stopping or reducing coordination with humanitarian organizations.
mm. Okay, so lots of mistrust has been sown within the ranks of the Taliban by the killing of the Al Qaeda leader. Arshad Yusufzai, thank you indeed for your thoughts this morning on this breaking story internationally. Al Qaeda leader al-Zawahiri has been killed in a CIA drone strike in Afghanistan's capital, Kabul. And of course, Joe Biden is very pleased by having made this announcement to his nation and the rest of the world. The killing happened on Sunday in the biggest blow to the group since its founder, Osama bin Laden, was killed in the year 2011. Shukran, Arshad Yusufzai, Assalamu alaikum to you, and to Khudafez to you. Thank you for always
Thank you.
being available
Thank
to
you.
talk with us.
Thank you.
It is exactly 8:30 a.m. South African time. News and views right here on Salam Media.